Did you know Hawaii wasn't always a U.S. state, but a powerful, independent kingdom with its own monarch, constitution, and global recognition? A kingdom where royalty walked barefoot on sacred land, where diplomacy reached across oceans, and where aloha meant more than a greeting, it meant sovereignty. Before America's flag ever touched Hawaiian soil, there was King David Kalākaua, a man the world came to know as the Merrie Monarch. He was loved for his charm, his music, and his vision. Kalākaua dreamed of uniting the Pacific under Hawaiian leadership, protecting Polynesian identity from Western domination, and ensuring his people could thrive in a changing world. But behind the smiles and hula dances, foreign businessmen were quietly tightening their grip on paradise. Decades earlier, Christian missionaries had arrived in Hawaii, preaching salvation to the native population. Over time, their descendants, American and European settlers, began seeking something very different: profit. They saw the islands not as a sovereign nation but as a golden opportunity for sugar, land, and wealth. By the late 1800s, these foreign businessmen controlled much of Hawaii's economy. They owned the plantations, the shipping routes, and the banks. They held the money, and with money came influence. Soon, their ambition turned to the crown itself. King Kalākaua, meanwhile, was celebrated across the world. He was the first reigning monarch to circumnavigate the globe, meeting emperors, kings, and presidents. From Tokyo to London, he spoke of Hawaii as a modern, proud, and independent nation. He wanted the world to see Hawaii as more than just a paradise, but as a respected member of the global community. But while the king was abroad strengthening ties, forces at home were plotting against him. In drawing rooms and business offices, powerful men whispered of reform and stability. They wore suits instead of armor, but their weapons were just as dangerous: money, influence, and manipulation. When Kalākaua returned to Honolulu, nothing felt the same. His advisors were divided, his cabinet was restless, and the once loyal elite were now looking toward Washington, not the throne. A small but determined group of mostly American residents had formed what they called the Committee of Safety. They claimed their mission was to protect law and order. In truth, their goal was to seize control of Hawaii's government. They believed the king was too extravagant, too generous to native Hawaiians, and too defiant of American business interests. When they realized persuasion wouldn't work, they decided to break him, not with open war, but with a document. A piece of paper that would look like reform, but would function as a weapon. By 1887, tensions were boiling over. The island was full of whispers of rebellion, of revolution, of betrayal. That summer, armed men marched toward Iolani Palace, carrying not banners but rifles. They were American and European residents, members of the so-called Reform Party. They demanded that the king sign a new constitution. King Kalākaua stood at a crossroads. He had no army to defend him. His people were unarmed, disempowered by laws pushed through by these same foreign interests. Facing the threat of violence, he was forced to comply. Under duress, he signed what would forever be known as the Bayonet Constitution, a name born from the weapons pointed at his palace gates. The Bayonet Constitution stripped Kalākaua of most of his royal powers and handed authority to the cabinet, dominated by foreign businessmen. It also restructured voting rights, granting political power primarily to wealthy foreigners while disenfranchising most native Hawaiians and even many poor white residents. In the blink of an eye, the Hawaiian people lost control of their own government. The kingdom that had once stood proudly as an equal among nations was now being run by outsiders with no loyalty to the land or its people. Hawaii, the land of aloha, was silenced by greed and gunfire. Kalākaua was devastated. The man once known for his joyful spirit, the Merrie Monarch, who loved music, feasts, and celebration, became a shadow of himself. He had spent years reviving Hawaiian pride after decades of missionary suppression. He had brought back the sacred hula, a dance once banned by missionaries. He built Iolani Palace, the only royal palace on American soil, not as a display of vanity, but as a symbol of Hawaii's dignity and progress. But after the Bayonet Constitution, even his palace felt like a prison. Every decision he made was questioned, his every move controlled by the same men who had forced his hand. His health began to decline. The laughter that had once filled the palace halls was replaced by the heavy silence of defeat. By 1890, the weight of betrayal had taken its toll. In late 1890, seeking medical treatment, King Kalākaua traveled to San Francisco. There, in the Palace Hotel, far from his homeland, his heart finally gave out. He died on January 20, 1891, the last reigning king of Hawaii. As his body was returned to Honolulu aboard the USS Charleston, the kingdom mourned. The sound of drums echoed through the night, and chants rose for the king who had tried to protect his people with diplomacy and dignity. Kalākaua's dream of a united Pacific kingdom died with him. The monarchy that had once stood tall among nations was gone, replaced by a provisional government controlled by businessmen and backed by American might. And so, paradise was stolen, not in a single day, but through years of calculated deception, greed, and betrayal. King Kalākaua's legacy lives on in Hawaii today through the cultural renaissance he inspired. The annual Merrie Monarch Festival honors his revival of hula and Hawaiian traditions, celebrating the pride and resilience of a people who refused to let their heritage die. But beneath the music and dance lies a story of warning, the story of how a kingdom was lost not by war, but by words. It began with a pen, a threat, and a king who loved his people too much to see them bleed. The world called him the Merrie Monarch. But history remembers him as something greater, the last Hawaiian king who tried to keep the crown from slipping away. If you believe this story deserves to be told, subscribe to the channel and share this video, because history like this should never be forgotten.